Nerdy, shy, and socially inappropriate. Do these words describe you at all? Then you've come to the right place to be your authentic, weird, and wormy self. Welcome to my channel. I'm Hannah, and I have autism and ADHD. I make weekly videos on this channel rating the representation of neurodiversity in the media, so go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button to join the neurodiverse bookworm family and never miss out on my latest recommendation. Girls and women are often missed in getting autism or ADHD diagnoses because it's thought that we don't present as stereotypically as boys, and historically all of the studies have been done on boys, and girls are more socially conditioned to act normal, and we get labels like nerdy, shy, socially inappropriate, and it's just thought, oh, we'll grow out of it. But this book, Nerdy, Shy, and Socially Inappropriate, was written about one woman's experience in late diagnosis. And Cynthia Kim was diagnosed at around the age of 42. She was already married, had a family, had a career. And this book is her unpacking her thoughts after diagnosis and learning tips and tricks and then sharing them with us so that we can understand better how to live with being women on the spectrum. Growing up undiagnosed, you get labeled things like lazy, rude, mean, selfish, cold, lazy, all kinds of things. And you think, man, this problem has got to be a moral failure. If I just try a bit harder, and you have so many questions you don't understand about yourself, like, why is this so hard? Why am I this way? And I wasn't diagnosed until I was almost 23, like seriously days away from being 23. And actually my 23rd birthday party was me and another friend also on the spectrum. We went out to eat and celebrate my birthday and my diagnosis. The author really speaks to what it's like getting a late diagnosis and all the what ifs. Diagnosis isn't like some magic pill. It really did, help me understand myself a lot better. And I now have far better health. I haven't struggled with depression and anxiety near as much as I used to. Getting a diagnosis hasn't changed who I am fundamentally, but getting a diagnosis has allowed me to understand myself and learn tips and tricks for living an authentic, healthy life on the spectrum, remove a lot of stress, remove a lot of rules that I built for myself in order to be more, I guess you could say, socially acceptable, normal. Man, I hate that word. And Cynthia Kim speaks to this here in her book, the experience of asking yourself all of these questions of, well, what does it mean to be autistic after you're diagnosed, and understanding of what does it mean to be me, and who am I as an autistic person? What would I be like if I weren't autistic, and where does my autism and ADHD begin or end, and the rest of me and my personality start? But it's actually, impossible to separate. And here she says, to the answer of what does it mean to be autistic, and confronting the question of what does it mean to be me, she says on page 229, in a way, they are the same question. There are aspects of me that are clearly autistic. I wouldn't stim so much if I wasn't autistic. I wouldn't have the same sensory sensitivities or communication difficulties. The way I experience my body and the world around me would be very different, but not everything is so clear-cut. Low self-esteem, anxiety, perfectionism, risk-taking, outside-the-box thinking, difficulty identifying my needs and wants. Would these aspects of me be the same if I wasn't autistic? How does being on the spectrum interact with my innate personality to make me who I am? So how do you feel? Do you separate your autism, ADHD, or other neurodiverse mental health conditions from who you are as a person? Or do you consider them integral to your personality and you wouldn't be you anymore? Let me know in the comments how you've answered these questions, or if you're still struggling with them. What would you like to understand? In her book, Cynthia Kim analyzes all of her experiences growing up undiagnosed and explores them through her lens post-diagnosis. And I want to talk about some interesting things she mentions here. She talks about in school the process of going from being a severely bullied kid to becoming a bully of weaker kids. I never went to school myself. I was homeschooled, but I do remember that in my first experience of moving out, living on my own, doing this internship in Quebec, I had a roommate who was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, and at the time, I didn't know anything about it, and so I was not understanding of her. We fought all the time. We pulled each other's triggers. And now that I'm diagnosed as autistic, boy, I've matured a lot. I wish I would have been a lot more patient with her, but at the time, when another of our housemates suggested to me that I was a lot like this girl, I would have nothing of it. I would not hear him. I was like, how dare you think that I'm like her? I hate her. I can't stand her. She's driving me nuts. But now I wish I would have been a lot more patient with her. Cynthia talks about so many different aspects of being an autistic woman, from your sensory profile. Here in chapter 7, she gives a lot of different definitions and examples of what it means to be sensory seeking, and also about sensitivities that you might have, that you might want to avoid: light sensitivities, sound sensitivities, touch sensitivities. I love her list here on page 107, 64 flavors of sensory seeking. I'm not going to read it to you because you're going to have to read this book for yourself. As it says, it's a user guide to an Asperger life. Now, don't get all bent out of shape because she uses the term Asperger. At the time when the book was written, Asperger's syndrome was still a diagnosis. And honestly, the term, whether to use it or not to use it, is such a pointless argument. In the 13 chapters of this book, Cynthia mentions so many different aspects of being a woman on the spectrum, and it's really relatable. She talks about sensory seeking behavior versus sensory avoidant, and I relate to her as a sensory seeker, primarily sensory seeker. Here on page 107, she has a section titled 64 Flavors of Sensory Seeking, and there's so many things such as oral fixations, sensory eating. I didn't know that this was such a big aspect of being autistic, but I hate bland food. Like, boring food just drives me nuts. I need my food to have like spice, strong sours, burn your mouth. Otherwise, it's boring. And I also liked, when I was a kid, really loved to suck my fingers. A lot of these are such subtle signs that you wouldn't necessarily think of as sensory seeking behavior or stimming, but she really opens it up and defines a lot of these behaviors and gives examples from her life. Something she also mentions that I thought was only me who experienced it was getting a feeling like your brain is itching. And I never understood this feeling. Like, I want to claw my brain out. Like, my brain's on fire. It's driving me nuts. It's just kind of like an itchy feeling. Even my whole body can be itchy when I'm feeling overwhelmed. And she mentions this. And when I read this, like, shortly after being diagnosed, I was like, wait a minute. So this too is related? What are some things that you found after being diagnosed were actually related to being autistic or ADHD? Let me know down in the comments. Maybe I'll learn some new things that I wouldn't necessarily have considered before. Another thing this book made me consider was how I viewed friendships and relationships. And for a while, I would make myself go and talk to people or feel really guilty and ashamed that I wasn't being as social as I should be. Ugh, I hate that word, should, so much. And I came to realize that I too identified with feeling more alone and out of place when I'm with people and in a crowded place than I do feeling alone, or when I am actually alone by myself. I want to read to you another quote from her book. If you look up alone in a thesaurus, you'll find a long list of negative and depressing synonyms: abandoned, companionless, deserted, desolate, detached, forlorn, forsaken, friendless, hermit, isolated, lonely, lonesome. Yet, when I'm alone, I rarely feel lonely. If I were writing the thesaurus entries for alone, the synonyms would include authentic, free, individual, indulgent, open, peaceful, protected, pure, quiet, rejuvenating, solitary. Thanks to the amount of time I spend alone, I'm on intimate terms with myself. I have a running internal dialogue that informs my life, my writing, my relationships. I observe and absorb the world around me. I'm good at being alone. The sense of inner security this creates is one of the hidden gifts of Asperger's. Once I gave up on the you should have this many friends, you should be more social, I started to feel a whole lot more relaxed and happy. Why do I need to force myself to associate with people that I don't really jive with? I really like how Cynthia talks about her relationship with her kids and with her husband and what it's like in a neurodiverse marriage. And one instance that she mentions that really stood out to me was when she was struggling with self-care and feeling extremely frustrated with her inability to do things and just how much work she made for her husband, how much extra support she needed. And when she was telling this to him and apologizing, he told her, "Your sincerity and passion and discipline and all of your good qualities overshadow this other stuff for me." He said it's about care and that I deserve to have someone care for me. I pushed a bit, asked him if he doesn't get tired of having to remind me about all those little things. He laughed and said, "Of course. But what am I going to do? We chose each other." And suddenly, everything seemed so simple. What started out as a piece about shame has become a piece about love. Because where I look at myself and see executive dysfunction and shame and dependence, my husband looks at me and sees what he always has: me. I'm about to get married in a few months, as soon as my fiance can get his visa. Like, I feel sometimes really frustrated and ashamed that he has to deal with some of my nastier moments. And in fact, he's seen what I would call my worst public meltdown before we even got engaged. It was just 2 or 3 days before he confessed his feelings for me. And what a difference it makes to have someone in your life that gets you, that understands you, that supports you, and looks for your good qualities And when you are feeling bad about yourself and stuck in a negative thought loop, they can provide a way to get out of it. They can pull you out of it and remind you of all the good qualities that they like in you. She also says, don't expect your partner to put up with unchecked autistic traits. You can change. There are things you can work on, and just because you're autistic doesn't give you a free pass. It's an explanation, but it also gives you a foundation to work on to better yourself within that framework. And if you've ever wondered where to draw the line between laziness and procrastination, or could it actually be an issue with executive dysfunction? Well, she answers that too in chapter 10. And I'm not going to define it for you because that would take way too long. And you're going to have to read this book in order to get the definition. But in this chapter, she has a short box that defines the different areas of executive function and also goes into some of the things that you can do to work around these issues, which I find really helpful. And if you want something quick to explain vocabulary or a concept, this book is great because the chapters are broken down into their subheadings as well as little boxes that will further define the terms or give you tips and tricks. And you can just look at the headings or the box titles and quickly find what you're looking for. At the end of the book, she questions whether our heightened anxiety is actually disordered at all, or could it simply be a protective measure for someone who has issues with reading nonverbal cues? I would rate this book a 5 on authenticity and relatability because its author is autistic and a late diagnosed woman, and for me that's quite relatable, many of the experiences she talks about here. Diversity I would only rate as a 1, but that's not to mean that this book isn't good. It's just the experiences of one woman, and when you've met one of us, you may relate to some of these things, but each one of us is an individual. There's no religious, cultural, or gender diversity in this book, but that doesn't matter. That wasn't what this book was meant to be. This book was meant to be her untangling her thoughts and feelings and understanding of what it means to live and exist as a healthy autistic woman. As for accuracy, I'll rate it a 4 because the term of Asperger's is considered outdated now. And this book is based on her personal experiences plus research that she's done to understand herself. As far as being thought-provoking, this book definitely gets another 5 from me. And for accessibility, as I mentioned earlier, there's the subheadings and boxes with extra information. And so I'll give that a 4.5. The reason I take off a half a point is that for some people, the font might be a little bit difficult to read if you have some issues with reading, and I have seen books with a better font and layout to make the reading itself easier. I want to read to you one final quote from this book. Nerdy, shy, and socially inappropriate. Those words have followed me since childhood, and now I know why. And it's the why that has fascinated me. The why is what this book is about. All the things I thought were broken or defective or weird about me, it turns out they're perfectly normal for people like me. Even more exciting, there actually are other people like me. Lots of them. Nerdy, shy, and socially inappropriate are no longer labels for me to shrink away from or offer up apologetically as an explanation for yet another awkward social encounter. I'm proud to be a nerd. I've traded in shy for more neutral-sounding quiet, and I'm unapologetically socially inappropriate. Understanding Asperger's has helped me understand myself, and that's made all the difference. So, if you were a book, what would your title be? Do the labels you've been given accurately reflect who you feel you are on the inside? If people would take a moment, stop, and get to know you for who you actually are and not judge a book by its cover. So thanks for watching. If you're looking for more neurodiversity related content, then click here to see my latest video. And don't forget to like, comment what you'd like me to review next, and subscribe so you don't miss my latest recommendation. See you next week.